the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and today we're hearing from Shah Aslam, who is the Chief Executive at Oceanfly. Welcome along to the show. Great to have you here.
Likewise. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, look, it's pretty exciting, the technology that Oceanfly have announced that you're going to be bringing into the market. You partnered with Regent, who have been developing this the technology in question here, which we refer to as e-seagliders. Quite fascinating. This is really sort of cutting edge stuff. So it's electric transport. It potentially allows some incredibly fast journeys from one port location to another. The cost of the transport when compared to other mechanisms looks as though it could well be quite competitive.
Yep.
But really we're looking at something that's cutting edge, that's kind of new to the world. So really excited to delve into this chat. But maybe before we start, tell us a little bit about yourself. How do you fit in and end up leading a business like this here in New Zealand that wants to change the way we get around the place?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, thank you, obviously, firstly, for having me on the show. Pleasure being here. It's an interesting journey, I guess. For me, it starts all the way back when I grew up in Japan, got used to using a lot of the public transport. And places like Japan, Singapore, their public transport is it's very robust. Cancellations, delays, you don't hear those words associated to public transport there. And when I moved across to New Zealand, in a different way, I mean, I studied down at Otago in Dunedin. We didn't really need public transport as uni kids. But when I moved up to Auckland and working, you have to use public transport. It is probably the most efficient way of getting around. But you often run into issues with timeliness here. And I think that was one of the starting catalysts of why I went down the industry of transport. Before that, I was working for BNZ in corporate finance, and, I had some great years there. Worked with a lot of cool people, and probably got to a point in my career where I thought, look, if I'm going to make the move, now is the time. Took a jump and landed, of all places, in Napier, and Napier, which is pretty cool. I mean, Hawke's Bay is a beautiful place, and getting involved in the transport side, behind the scenes, understanding aviation, understanding transport. It's been a good, awesome couple of years. So when COVID hit, things slowed down, but we were lucky that we were still an essential service provider, so we could continue operating. We moved a lot of PPE equipment, a lot of blood tests, samples, all sorts of stuff, which helped a lot of people in need. And I guess if you think about transport, when we talk about connectivity, when we talk about prosperity, economic development, all of those things, one of the catalysts for those things is transport. If you can't reach to places in a timely manner, then you forgo a lot of those benefits. So we looked at other ways of doing transport, and it was December 2021. I remember clearly. I came across Regent on LinkedIn, and I sent a message to Billy, who's the CEO and co-founder of Regent, and I think from memory, within 24 hours, he'd come back to me. I still remember he'd drawn a map of New Zealand, and he'd focused on Wellington, Blenheim, Picton areas, and in his way, he showcased the population size and the benefits that Seagliders would have. And instantly I knew, look, not just from a technology point of view, but from someone leading such a company, it was a good fit. So we entered into formal discussions, negotiations, and a couple of months later, we were announcing our big order, which was for 25 Seagliders. So the Seagliders come in two models at the moment, the smaller one, which is 12-seater, the Viceroy, and the larger one, Monarch, which can go up to 100 seats. We've placed an order for 15 of the Viceroys and 10 of the Monarchs.
Incredible.
And we're anticipating delivery mid-decade. And the way these things work, just to give you a quick overview, they start on the hull, harbor side, just like a boat. As they gain speed, they rise on their foils. And as they gain further speed, they take off, flying 10 meters above the surface of the water. also known as wing and ground effect. So essentially the cushion of air between the water and the sea glider they glide on. And the biggest benefit of these, I guess, making use of wing and ground effect is you conserve a lot of battery by not having to go up to higher altitudes, but you also gain a lot of the benefits of the high speed transport. So it's the best of two worlds, if you ask me.
That's great. Now, of course, I should say a huge thank you to our show partners, to 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology, who make all these sort of conversations possible for us. So thank you to our great supporters. So looking in, at this technology, it certainly sort of got my mind going, like, where this idea for sea gliders, come from. Why isn't this something that we've sort of seen operating, previously? It sounds really smart, this idea, of fast transport from, one port to another. And, you talk about, I guess in a New Zealand context, that might be, between, Wellington and Nelson, I guess, in the US sort of, context, what would be sort of typical, what would be some examples of ports that you might be able to use this type of technology to get between there?
Yeah, so look, in New Zealand, I think we're very fortunate because if you look at our population, 80% of the population is close to coastal areas, or within half an hour to 45 minutes drive.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, you look at it and you go like, look, this is the perfect solution. We've also got a large body of infrastructure that sits out there, which is known as the water. And I think it's underutilized at the moment. Biggest advantage of sea gliders is that we can make use of that waterways. And look, I always say they don't crack, they don't break. And yes, water levels are rising, but they don't flood. So that's the biggest advantage that we have. We've seen this through Air Napier during the cyclone in Hawke's Bay, when the roads were closed. Napier technically was cut off from the rest of the world. We were a little island on our own. Same with Northland during the cyclones and, Coromandel as well. That road to Coromandel and back is obviously struggling. So when you look at those regions around New Zealand, you go like, look, we don't actually need a big piece of infrastructure, otherwise known as a runway or airport. We don't actually need a lot. We just need any body of water, a bit of a pontoon, bit of a charging infrastructure, and away we go. And one of the biggest benefits of the sea gliders is the range of this. In a straight line, you're looking at 300 kilometers at a speed of 300 kilometers an hour. So to put that in a real life example, you're technically looking Auckland, Whangarei, and return without having to recharge. You're also looking at Auckland to Whangarei in a 35, 40-minute journey, which is, I think, huge. And then the third biggest thing is our key stakeholders, which otherwise known as the ports around the country. Most of them are based in city centers. So if you need to travel to city center Auckland, you don't have to make that commute from the airport into city center. You're essentially landing in city center, walk to your meetings, walk to a lunch date, and jump back on a sea glider, and back you go.
Well, just getting from an airport to city, and some cases, can be anywhere from 15 to 45 plus minutes, right? So if your entire journey, can be shrunk down by dropping those steps out, that's
Absolutely,
that's a pretty big deal. So the New Zealand examples is obviously sort of a bunch of places where that could happen. Tell us a little bit around Regent's their sort of story, I guess. I'm presuming being US based that they're looking at some use cases in the US market as well, and there must be a whole bunch of other kind of examples around the world. I guess great to get the New Zealand perspective, but also to kind of look out at other parts of the world and what those use cases might look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if you look in the US, I mean, that's a massive market, right? You look at, let's start with the East Coast because that's where Regent is based as well. You've got New York, Boston, Washington, down Florida. I think if you look at the user case from Florida down to the islands, that's a massive opportunity, right? And I think Billy and Mike have picked up on that, which is phenomenal. If you step outside of the US from the East Coast to the West Coast, there's a lot of opportunities there as well. But globally, if you look at it, you step out to island countries, you've got Japan, you've got Singapore, you've got the coasts of South Korea. And then if you look at out to Europe, Brittany Ferries, for example, is one of their customers. They've signed up as well. So it's I think it's easy to restrict ourselves to landlocked countries, but I think this is one of those transport modes which benefits those countries that have that neighboring to water areas. And I think one of the stats was that 40% of the world's population lives close to the water. So, if we can't target 100%, well, 40% of 7.5 or 8 billion people, that's it's not a bad place to start.
Now, I look back to when I was a youngster. Hovercrafts were kind of a technology that picked up for sort of a period of years. Maybe it was couple of decades or so, where that seemed to be a technology of choice for some scenarios. I remember catching big hovercraft, probably early 1980s, probably around 1981, from it was from Dover to Calais, if I remember correctly. And that was an absolute beast of a machine, and it just skipped across the the channel, and was really neat. But the sea gliders, or the seaplanes, the sort of technology that we're talking about are really going to be next level, aren't they? In terms of I guess the big thing is pace. Now, you talk about them flying 10 meters above the water. That sounds a little bit scary. Is that one of the reasons why we haven't seen this technology pick up in the past? There hasn't been I guess maybe the same simplicity of sort of safety that there is with some of the newer technologies.
Absolutely. Look, when you when you talk about 10 meters above water, it seems like a long distance, but it's not as well. On the flip side, if we look in the past, back
compared to being sort of 30,000 feet
30,000
up, 10,
feet
10
up.
kilometers up, like, hold on, it's a 100th of a kilometer.
Yeah,
Hold on.
yeah, it is. But if you look back in the past, I think it was the 1950s or 60s when the Russians developed this technology for different uses. Back then,
different uses, military cases, I think, right?
Yeah, sensitive topics, so I won't go there. But yeah, absolutely. But if you look at how much technology has changed, alone in the last 5 or 10 years, right? Let alone the last 70 years, things which weren't possible back then are. I mean, 70 years ago, you still had to write letters, and it'd take a month to get to the other side of the world. I think my dad studied in Texas, and I think he used to say in the 60s or late 50s, if you made a telephone call back home, it used to take a day or two, and you'd put your name in the queue and number, and you'd get a ping later on. So I think where we are now, where we can instantly communicate with people, video conferencing, all of those things which weren't possible. So technology has come a long way, which has allowed and enabled some of these great ventures to take place. From a sea glider point of view, back in the 1950s, the Russians didn't have the automation around it. So Regent have taken advantage of, I guess, the growth in aviation and how far aviation has come from an avionics point of view. That's some of the elements they're going to be using as part of their automation process. And I think that ensures and gives a lot of confidence to us, and hopefully to the public as well, that these things will operate in a safe environment. These things are being built to similar standards as an aircraft. And that's purely because of Mike and Billy's background. They are ex-aviation that have come into this industry, and I think that's a very positive thing. We see that as well with our conversations. I think we're technically stepping down in a way, not from anything else but a speed point of view. Aviation aircrafts do go up to 250, 300 nautical miles an hour. I think we're stepping into a zone which is doing 160 knots an hour. I think if you had someone stepping up from the marine environment where ships are traveling at 5 or 10 knots to 160, I think the perspective is different. So I think all of those elements do go a long way in ensuring that we operate with the safety in mind. But also look, from a technology point of view, it was the 1910s or the 1920s when the first commercial flight happened. A lot of people were skeptical. Here we are today. I think last year the stats were about 3 billion people flew around the world. We've seen it through COVID when aviation took a bit of came to a standstill, impacted a lot of people. So it's become second nature to us. And I think electric vehicles are helping some of those arguments. People are getting more and more comfortable, but I also appreciate that, look, it's probably another decade or two to go before people fully become comfortable. And that's the beauty of sea gliders. When you talk about electric aviation, people are a bit wary of flying 10, 20,000 feet in the air with electric batteries. Whereas in our case, we are only 10 meters above the water and we're always above a runway. So in the absolute worst case, you can just glide back onto the water, send out a signal for a pickup. And I
If
think
your batteries get a little bit hot, you just duck
submerged in
down
water, right?
and douse them a little bit with some
Correct.
dip them in this
And
water.
and then as we've seen recently, unfortunately, with events involving Singapore Airlines and Qatar Airways, where turbulence has caused a lot of injuries and stuff. So I think there are a lot of people out there who don't enjoy necessarily flying at 30,000 feet. And I think for them, this is definitely the game changer. So I can assure everyone that, look, this will be, high standard of safety. And the way Regent are designing, manufacturing, and building these sea gliders, we've been there twice. It's phenomenal to see the leaps in technology that the world has taken.
Now, you've got with the two different models. So the smaller one that will be 12 passenger seats plus two for the do you call them a pilot or do you call them a captain or those that
we're trying to come up with a hybrid name, just like the sea glider. We're trying to figure out a name, but I think at the moment you can refer to them as captains.
Yeah. So the 12-seater one, I think that was sort of in the 300 kilometer an hour
Correct.
type speed, up to 500 or over 500 kilometers an hour, is sort of targeted for the larger kind of 100 passenger variants. So some pretty snappy speeds. Now, these aren't the sort of speeds that we would usually think of for a ferry. But my understanding is that from a regulatory perspective, the sea glider is more inclined to, I guess, sort of follow marine type regulations rather than aviation regulations. Is that correct?
That's correct. So back in the day, IMO, which is the International Maritime Organization, and ICAO, which is the International Civil Aviation Organization, that both sit under the umbrella of the United Nations, reached an agreement that it's not necessarily speed, but it's anything that flies under 500 feet will be regulated by maritime, and anything above 500 feet will be aviation space. And so I guess the key benefit with the wing and ground effect is because it needs to be so close to the surface of the water, it falls under maritime. But and that's the beauty of this thing from a regulatory point of view. We've had some really positive conversations with Maritime New Zealand. They've taken on board what we're doing. They've asked us to prepare the safety case, which obviously in conjunction with Regent we're working on. But I'd just like to assure the public that this will be built to aircraft specifications, but will fall under maritime and the U.S. Coast Guard out of the States. And rest assured, it will be a safe vehicle.
What are the tallest masts on yachts and super yachts and so on, and our tallest I guess our the tallest ships, because you're gonna have some things to think about there. I'm picking
absolutely, and look, some of them are taller. I mean, if you look at cargo ships or cruise ships, they stand taller than 10 meters.
Totally.
But again, this feeds back to the technology, the avionics, the radar system that Regent is installing in these sea gliders. That will be able to pick up these key elements. From what we know, I think it can pick up as small as a jet ski, and it can pick it up quite a distance away, which allows us to maneuver out of the way and avoid any of the key obstacles.
So if that jet ski's going over some really big surf and is getting a bit of air and you think it might hit 10 meters, you can prepare for that?
We can prepare for that. We can maneuver. But I think more importantly, if there was a jet ski in the way, we'd probably move out of the way beforehand.
Yeah. For sure. Wow, that's pretty interesting. And I guess sort of looking through the different modes of transport. So I'm thinking around Auckland to Northland, but I'm sure listeners can replace that with any other journey that might fit for where they live and where they might travel. But that's a journey I'll take from time to time. Doing it in a plane is it's a bit of a hassle sort of getting to an airport. Auckland International Airport seems to more and more be leaning into being a monopoly business. So I think, the last time I came out of the terminal at Auckland International, I'm used to a kind of a, you get through customs and then you walk about, I don't know, 10 meters out the door and your Uber picks you up. I think last time it was, more like a 10-minute walk in the rain to try and get. And, when I asked someone from the airport, is this just a temporary thing? They said, oh, no, this is, this is permanent. And, no doubt there's a financial reason for them wanting to, promote, valet parking right on the doorstep or some other commercial thing. But for those that sort of do regular journeys, airports aren't always the most efficient, beast even for domestic flights. Although for those shorter hauls, say in Auckland to Northland, it's a reasonably quick process to go through, depending on what your transport is to the airport and whether you need to park and where you can park and the like. So I'm sort of thinking, okay, got that mechanism from Auckland to Northland. It's certainly something I could drive. You can take a bus, but if there was an option that was as simple as jumping on a ferry and it would get you up there very, very quickly, that seems quite compelling. So I'm kind of curious to sort of walk through the case. Like, can you imagine for, say, an Auckland to Northland type service, would people be jumping on at a downtown ferry terminal, or is that sort of too complicated to, for the vehicle to, to navigate through and get around other stuff before you kind of get out to sea a little bit and can, turn things up a bit to sort of full pace, and then what would it look like at the other end? Is that going to be part of the challenge, that there's a lot of time sort of wasted to and from at either end, or is it likely to be at the much sort of simpler end of things?
Absolutely. I think you've touched on a couple of points there. If you don't mind, I'd like to get to first. So the monopoly argument is an interesting one. I think to your earlier point, why this hasn't been done before in a country like New Zealand, or, we haven't been creative. I think if you look at the industry as a whole in New Zealand, if we take transport, I think it's very, it's not competitive, right? Let's not hide behind the bush. And I think when you have no competition, you don't really breed creativity. I think airlines, other operators, ferry operators, the railways, they all become complacent. And I think if you look at the last 20, 30, 40 years, that's what's happened in the country. All the transport systems have become complacent. And the unfortunate thing is that the taxpayers are paying for it twice. They're paying to bail out these companies, but then they're also paying an exorbitant amount of prices on their tickets. New Zealand is not big enough where you have to break the bank to travel, right? Let's be real. It's not. It's a beautiful country, but it's got good geography, but it's not that big. And I think that lack of innovation stems from the fact that there is no competition across the industry. So when you look at what we're trying to do with e-seagliders, yes, we're trying to bring some competition into the market. We're trying to give people a choice, because I think in the 21st century, people should have a choice of how they travel. It shouldn't be just one way or one mode. So I think that's the biggest key. And I think airports, airlines, ferry operators, ports, they all have their business cases, but I think they probably need to become a bit more innovative. Also, I remember a time when I was a young kid, I was fortunate to fly a lot. Traveling used to be fun. Be at the train station, be at the airport, be at the ferry terminal. You'd get in there and the feeling would be different. And I think that fun has been taken away from all modes of travel. And I think it's been replaced by anxiety. It's been replaced by the fact that if you're a second late, you're going to miss the flight, and that's the end of the world. And I think that's not the way how travel should be done. So I think our aim with the Sea Gliders is not just to provide the fast, affordable, comfortable transport. It's to bring that fun back. As a business case, we should not be making money off canceled flights or extra baggage or select a seat. The business case itself should be strong enough where you can provide that service to people. So you should be able to, with a Sea Glider, walk down, if you were to say Auckland, to the viaduct or the ferry terminal, wherever we get space, and we'll work with the local authorities around there, and we've had some good conversations. If there's a seat available, if it's 30 seconds left till takeoff, you should be able to buy a ticket, jump on, and away you go. On the flip side, we will create the technology as well where you can book in advance to make sure that you have a seat, right? So it's that convenience piece is a big one.
Yeah.
How do you calm people down? And then there is the high frequency. So if you do miss a Sea Glider, the next one shouldn't be too far away. So we're bringing, I guess, high-speed transport and public transport together to move a large number of people and cargo. Yeah. And as long as we can keep true to our founding pillars of Ocean Flyer, I think we should be good.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that sounds fascinating. Now, to make this sort of thing work, there's obviously price points that you have to land at, and I mean I'm just bouncing things around in my head. I'm picking sort of say a battery capacity in one of these smaller vehicles might be say 10x what it would be in an electric car. So in terms of cost, if the smaller vehicle is going to take a dozen people, the cost of the electricity, well, that's not a crazy sort of big cost to it. You've got
it depends on how Transpower manage the grid, but yeah, it shouldn't be.
That's true. You certainly hope that's not going to be too much. You've got and a vehicle that's relying on electric motors, so it's very different from a maintenance perspective, compared to a traditional aircraft engines. That the maintenance cost there is another sort of big slice. You're not having to take them up to to a high height, which is a lot of the fuel gets burnt there. So it seems like when you sort of break it down a little bit, that this should be something that is pretty competitive from a price perspective, and then presumably more so as you go up to your 100-seater glider, right? So a 100-seater sea glider, presumably those sorts of things sort of improve a bit with scale as well. Certainly when you're talking about the cost for your pilot or your captain, carrying 100 people rather than a dozen. So what are you thinking would be the sort of numbers if we look at them in a say a New Zealand dollar or US dollar type type context for one of these journeys? It's maybe 100 to 150 sort of kilometer journey.
So those those journeys, and I think most of if you were to look at New Zealand or the main city centers, on the smaller one, you're looking at average, flying time of 35-40 minutes. We don't anticipate that going above $100, so it'll be sub 100, and that's what we're kind of working towards.
In New Zealand dollar
terms,
New Zealand
dollars,
so internationally, that's more like sort of $60 type.
Correct, 50 to 60 US dollars. I don't think it should be more than that. And then you're right. Once you get to the larger one, the economies of scale kick in. So you can look at even slightly lower than the 50 to 60 US dollars. You could be at the 30 to 40 US dollar mark. So I think again, it's gonna be affordable enough where you can do the travel on a daily basis if you need to. And that's the key with the Sea Gliders. But also
30 to 40 minute commute, right?
Look,
that's totally less than what some people will use in any big city to get around.
Look, don't even get me started on Auckland right now. To get from east or west or south or north Auckland into center city, you're looking at more than 50 minutes, 60 minutes. That traffic is shocking. And people talk about infrastructure. I don't think adding another 4-lane highway is the solution. I think this goes back to the issue at hand, which is public transport. You have to have a strong public transport network, and that needs to be multimodal, right? It's not just trains, it's not just buses. It needs to be across the board if you are to remove congestion. Making streets one way or getting rid of parking is not the answer to long-term sustainability. And I think that's what we see in the e-seagliders, that if we can remove people from the roads, and I'm not saying, we're going to remove all people, but the more people we can remove off roads, the better it is. We've seen this in Northland with the Brindurban's being closed. We've done a couple of trips since then. It's added another 30 to 40 minutes to the journey time.
Yeah.
You go to Northland right now, Whangarei and cities beyond, and you talk to some of the local businesses, anywhere from your cafes to your retail stores to your pharmacies. They've all seen an impact to their top line, and it shouldn't be the case. As part of being part of the developed country, the base level infrastructure should not crumble under the slightest of weather events or roadworks or any of that stuff. It should be robust on its own. And I think on the flip side, while I say a lot about it, I think that's where the opportunity for something like e-seagliders and Ocean Flyer is. And, I encourage the country to work with us, anywhere from your corporates to local councils to governments to businesses, because there is an opportunity here for everyone. What we're trying to do, we are trying to disrupt the system anytime, and you would have heard this a lot in the tech world. Disruptors come through. Uber came through, taxis became complacent. You still, with some of the taxi companies, you still have to call and book, and you don't know when the taxi is going to arrive. The biggest thing with Uber is not just the fact that you can order from the app. It's the fact that you know exactly at what point the taxi or the car is going to show up on your front door, right? And that goes across the board for a lot of these technological apps, right? They've done a great job. They've disrupted the dinosaurs in the industry, and we all know what happened to dinosaurs, and we're here to do the same.
And of course, there's the zero emission sort of nature of electric,
absolutely,
transport, which is obviously,
and we started with that
today.
We started with that goal of zero emissions, but soon it became affordable, comfortable, fast. So all of those byproducts that we've added on, people right now have been discouraged by what's happening in the industry to travel, be it for life events, for funerals, weddings, be it for education purposes, healthcare purposes, be it for work. And I think Ocean Flyer in a lot of these communities can help change that. Ask a granddaughter sitting in Auckland who wasn't able to make it for their grandparents' birthday or life event, up in Northland. It's sad when you kind of hear those stories, because again, I come back to the point: New Zealand is not big enough where traveling should be such a anxious, costly headache of a problem. It should be simple.
Now, I've spent a bit of time looking at and talking to leaders in sort of the other parts of the electric sort of air transport field. Chief executive from Bell in the US, and number of people at other firms. And I guess what I've noticed when it comes to this type of innovative transport and technology is that it does, and I'm picking there's a level of crossover here when we look at the sort of electric transport. Obviously, safety is a really key element. But to really develop the technology so that it's ready for public use, it does seem to take quite some time to get there. How does it look for you if Regent take a decade more to deliver this technology at a commercial level? what would that actually, what would that mean? Does that sort of break things for you guys? And do you have a feel for what that pace of development and commercialization looks like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, the beauty and nature of risks is such that you can come up with all the mitigation policies, but when the risk actually hits, you know, sometimes you just got to deal with it. And the reality in this case, why we're confident that it's not going to be delayed by a decade is, number one, we've seen Regent hit their milestones. All the milestones they've laid out to us since we started this process with them, they've smashed them, which is awesome to see, because for a project of this size, new mode of transport, all of the above, delays are common, like you say. So we have seen Regent, and they're doing a phenomenal job. They've got a lot of experience behind them. Secondly, and this is where the fact that it's regulated by the Coast Guard and Maritime, I think that gives us a lot of confidence as well that it won't be delayed. Forgetting everything else, if you look at it, it's fair that aviation does take a longer time. Part of that is a safety case, because when you are flying at 30,000 feet in the air, you got to be across every single nut, bolt, screw in that airplane to make sure that it can sustain the the tensions that an airplane goes through when it's flying at 30,000, especially when the turbulence hits. So, that when you bring it back down to the maritime environment, where part of your flight is in two dimension, you're in the water, and then the other part is just 10 meters above the water. I think the path to certification and regulation because of that is much faster. And I think those are the things that give us confidence that Regent will hit their mid-decade timelines. In the absolute worst case, like you say, hopefully not by a decade, but if there are delays, we will work with Regent. But also, if you look at other modes of transport and the technologies that are up and coming, I think the e-seaglider is still way ahead of its time in a good way. So I don't believe a delay of a couple of years, in the worst case, is going to impact us or it's going to break our resolve. I think we are committed to the cause. We think that a country like New Zealand should have some innovative ways of moving people and goods at a very cost-effective price. And since we are committed to that goal, we will continue with Regent, and we will continue to back Regent.
Yep. Okay. Well, it's gonna be a really interesting one to watch. The other one I've been speaking to, Whisk, and with their Cora eVTOL. So that's been an interesting journey. I think they're now 14 years in. They've done quite a bit of testing here in the New Zealand market and so on. So you can, but obviously there are differences there between different types of technologies and so on, as you say. So it's going to be a really interesting space to watch, and we certainly wish you all the best with Ocean Flyer. And look, always encourage that New Zealand should be a market where we're maybe a little bit simpler from a regulatory perspective than say others in the world. We want to be a centre for innovation and for trying out these sort of technologies. So I'd be hopeful that we can be towards the sort of front end of this journey, and government regulatory bodies can get that balance right from creating an opportunity for this sort of technology to be safely tested and trialed in this market. Before it goes into play commercially. But really, really exciting. I'll sign up now for a ride as early as possible, as I usually do on these things. We look forward to how it progresses from here. So thanks very much, Shah. Anything else that we haven't covered that we should squeeze in?
No, look, thank you very much for your time. And like I've always said, we are trying to do something different. I appreciate all the support that we've received from our key partners. Northland has been one of those regions that's been phenomenal. Northport, Whangarei District Council, Northland Inc., all the ports around the country, they've been very supportive of us. Maritime New Zealand, I think, has grabbed the bull by the horns, which is been awesome to see. And, while the onus is on us to obviously provide them a safety case, the conversations are positive and they're open to them. So that's huge. And, I welcome anyone else who wants to come partner up with us, because like I said, this isn't about just Ocean Flyer. What we are out to achieve is a big thing in an industry, or one of the industries that needs it the most. And, we welcome all and everyone to join forces with us to improve the level of connectivity in New Zealand, because at the end of the day, connectivity does breed prosperity, and innovation is a huge part of that. So whatever we can do to help, we will. But we look forward to introducing Seagliders into New Zealand by mid-decade. And I'd love to sign you on for the first seat, but I've been told by my colleagues that I've sold the first 12 seats many times over. But you know what? I will sign you up for the first seat again.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks everyone for listening in. Great to have you joining us and catching New Zealand Tech Podcast today. Of course, if you've been catching the live stream, and there's always a bunch that do, be sure to go follow us on your favorite sort of audio app, whether that's sort of Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And so you can follow us and catch our audio episodes that way for free. Of course, if you've been listening into the audio episodes, then make sure you follow across on your favorite sort of platform for video. We tend to be across YouTube, Facebook Live, and X from a live platform under NZ Tech Podcast, or you can follow myself, Paul Spain, on LinkedIn to get the live streams. LinkedIn actually quite good, because if you happen to be running the app, you will get those sort of pop-up alerts when we live stream. So yeah, that's us for this week. Thanks again, Shah, and really excited to hear about Ocean Flyer and the Regent technology that you've ordered, and we look forward to seeing them here in New Zealand.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, cheers. And of course, big thank you to our show partners, to Gorilla Technology, HP, Spark, 2 Degrees, and 1NZ.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.